See, when we drove it all the way home, the snap ring is basically flush with this housing here. It's basically flush all the way around. And when you seat that, you'll notice a difference in the sound when it seats all the way fully, this bearing, into this assembly here. So that baby is good to go. Spin it, make sure it spins freely, and that should be it. As you can see, this is a brand new bearing, and there's a little bit of a wobble, which is fine. There's tolerances, but if you get a big wobble, then you know you got to replace that the first motion shaft bearing. I always replace them myself anyway. It's just a good precaution. This one seems to take a lot of abuse, the first motion shaft bearing. So it's a good idea to replace it. But so what we've done so far is install the first motion shaft. Before that, we've installed a leg gear with the thrust washers with a wire through it so we don't lose it. And next we'll be installing the needle bearings into the first motion shaft, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, now we're ready to install the 18 needle bearings into the first motion shaft. So I have a brand new pack of needle bearings here. And let me zoom down inside the, so you can get a little bit better. And that's your first motion shaft. So what we're going to do is just add some grease in here and start placing in these needle bearings. Let me just put a little bit of grease in there right now. What the grease is going to do is going to hold the needle bearings in its place as you start to set them in. There is a little ridge inside this first motion shaft that the needle bearings sit down on. You don't want them going all the way down inside the in the shaft there. So just slide them down, and that's about as far as it'll go, right about there. You'll feel them hit the bottom of that ridge there. And just start placing them in. Again, just take your time, because if you get one of them out of whack and it slides down inside there, then you're going to have to just fish it back out, because if you put in that third motion shaft with that needle bearing that's fallen down, you're not going to ever get that third motion shaft in. So just take your time. Oops. There we go. That's it. So when you put them in, just push them down with your finger. Make sure that you're on that ridge. And you see how the grease will just hold them in place. So we're just going to slide it down in there. Got a little away from me. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to put in the other 8, the rest of the needle bearings, but you can see how I'm going to go all the way around and just put in the needle bearings. Oops. Okay, you can see I have the 18 needle bearings in the first motion shaft, and just to be precautious, just try pushing down on every one. Make sure that they're seated fully on that ridge, so that when you slide in that third motion shaft, that you won't have a needle bearing fall out on you. And just as a precaution, I'm just going to take my 1/4 inch drive, since I can't get my pinky in there, and just go down to the bottom of the needle bearings around, just to make sure that they're not in there cockeyed. Okay, that feels good. That should be it. So that's how you install your needle bearings. Just use grease so that they'll hold them in place, and just take your time, put them in one by one. Now we're ready for the third motion shaft assembly. Okay, we're going to put in the third motion shaft now. We're going to put oil on where the synchronizer ring will go on. That's nice and rolled up. Put oil where the bearing housing is going to go on. Now we're going to put Oil on the third motion shaft. That front little part where it goes into the needle bearings. Lots of oil. Okay, got that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take off this hub assembly from the third motion shaft, and we're going to fit it into the synchronizer box. Reason being, when we put the third motion shaft in, the lay gear here hits on this guy and it causes put in an angle. So we'll go ahead and put this on the first motion shaft in this fashion. Notice again that this side of this piece goes down on here. This side goes on the third motion shaft. So it's going to go in here like this. So let's put that on there. And just set the synchronizer ring down there. Okay. There we go. That guy's on there. Now if you remember, that guy is splined, so it's a little tricky. We're gonna fit the third motion shaft on there. Put some oil on that. Okay. I'm just putting some oil on where this synchronizer ring is gonna meet up with the gear. So let's give this a shot, see how we do. So we're gonna lift the third motion shaft up. Again, I put oil here and here on this guy. Now we're gonna slowly lower him down in there. Mesh up the splines. There we go. Now we're gonna slowly work it in. Let's see if we can't get it in the first motion shaft. That should be in the third motion shaft, because now we're on the bearing race here. So that's putting the third motion shaft in. Let's see, we got a little bit of, okay, that's good. So we're in the needle bearings there, and we're all in there. That's how you put the third motion shaft in. Now all we're going to do is align the housing up with the gasket, and then drive that bearing housing in, drive it home. Okay, now we're going to line up this aluminum housing with the gasket, and we're going to put our pin back into the hole here on this bearing housing. So the pin's in there. Now you just slide on your gasket into the correct orientation. There we go. This will help you line up the this guy for the pin. So you can see I've got to swing this around a little bit. So lift it up. Oops, there we go. Almost. There we go, that's pretty good. Of course, I've got to be precise. If you don't get this lined up, you'll never get the rear extension back together. Okay, I think that's it. That's pretty good. Gasket down. Yep, that's pretty good. Actually, I'm going to slide it over just a little bit more. There we go. And that's how you line up the pin so it'll fit into the rear extension housing. Now we're just going to take the gasket back off and drive this aluminum housing home. Okay, we're going to drive in the aluminum housing into the gearbox here, the main gearbox. We've got the third motion shaft in there. Just make sure it spins freely, nothing's binding up. That's just to check to make sure that the needle bearing is not, one of the needle bearings hadn't slipped out into the thing. So we're going to be checking this as we drive it in. We've lined it up, so now I've had to take off all the stuff so I could put on my, my makeshift tube here and drive the bearing home. So we'll put it on there, and we're driving this on the outer race of that bearing there. I'll take my hammer, wooden mallet. Let's try to drive this home. So everything's lined up. Let's give her a good smack, see what we get. Again. There she goes, slipping in there nice. Still rotating real nice. It's a beautiful thing. Let's check. Yep, driving it in nice and even. That's beautiful. Alright. Oh yes. Almost there, almost home. Okay, almost all the way. Still rotating. Alright, and when you hit it all the way home, it'll be a different sound. That one sounded like it hit bottom there. That's good. Try smacking it one more good time. Yep, that one drove all the way home. Take that off. Yep, nice and flush. When you drive it all the way home, you'll hear a different sound, and your aluminum housing will be flush. So that's good. Spins nice. That's a beautiful thing. So there we go. We'll set this up on the bench and show you what we got here. So everything's driven on there, spinning like a top there. That's beautiful. Alright, and that's all there is to installing the third motion shaft. Okay, we've just installed the third motion shaft, and let's just check while we got it on its side here. Just make sure everything spins nice and free. Here's your first motion shaft spinning here. Needle bearings, there's nothing's falling out there. I've got my leg gear still down below, hadn't installed the shaft yet. So the gears, here's third gear, spins, second gear. Let me get the Synchro out of the way. There we go. Second gear spins. Third motion shaft spins nice and free. So nothing's binding up in there. So we've installed everything correctly. Okay, one thing we need to inspect while we got the gears in is the infloat between second and third gear. And it's that little brass right there, just in between those guys. So we'll push the second gear and third gear apart. Take our feeler gauge. Tolerances for this 3 Synchro gearbox is 4 thousandths to 6 thousandths infloat. So I've got it on the biggest one, the 6 thousandths. And there she goes. She slides in there nice and tight. So that's how you check the infloat, second and third gear. Okay, the next thing I'm going to try to get for you is installing the lay shaft into the lay gear here. On this, you want to make sure that the keyed in, or this pointed in, is at the front. It goes into the back this way, so both bearings are towards the front, and the single bearing is on the back here on this lay gear. So we still have our wire in there. We're going to loop things up. Lots of oil. And prior to this, make sure that your oil holes are nice and clean. I think I went over that. Blow it out with air, compressed air, make sure it's good. Note on that, this oiling hole is for this end right here, and it stops about right there. So this doesn't go all the way through. So this oiling hole is for this oiling hole here. These two for this guy right here, that end. So, and it drills out about that much this way, and then these two get supplied oil that way. So this is going to be tricky. So I still have my wire in here. I'm just going to take out the first part of the wire, slide it back. I can see my front thrust washer bearing, and I'm going to try to get it up in the location that it's supposed to. And at the same time, raise up my leg gear. Get it up in there. And I'm going to have to set this down. I can't get it at that angle. So I'm going to set it down. Let me move the camera down a little bit. You can see that. There we go. Okay. There we go. Alright. Now I'm just going to lift that leg gear up. There we go. I'm using my pinky right now in the front here to line up the thrust washer and that bearing. And I'm going to pump some oil in there. Lots of oil. That guy. There we go. Now we're going to try to put in the force motion, the leg gear shaft through the front. Line it up. Get it right. Twisted the first motion shaft a little bit, and that's what got me in got that home there, so that's good. So now we're going to try to put in the first motion, the leg gear shaft. I believe we're in there. There she goes. That's it. Okay, there goes my wire. I'll just go ahead and pull this out. There we go. Spin it around a little bit so you guys can see my hands in the way. Okay, now we got to get this rear thrust washer. Pump some oil through the back there. Come around the camera. Hope I don't knock it. Pump some oil back in there. There we go. Okay, now the tricky part. Let's see if we can get that thrust washer up so I can catch it with my pinky or something. My finger. There we go. Okay, I got it with my finger here and lining it up. I'm just going to slide the shaft through. There she is. Come on, baby. Okay. Now I've got my thrust washer there. Let me just wiggle the lathe shaft. There she goes. Excellent. Okay. That's putting in the lathe shaft into the lathe gear. A little bit tricky. Just take your time with it and get it fitted in there. And I'm going to turn the gearbox around so you can see the front and how that key works on the front cover there. But that's all there is to installing the lathe shaft gear. Just take your time. Okay, now just to show you, here's the lathe shaft that we just installed with the keyed end on this side. Here's the front cover, and you can see this is where the lathe shaft is going to go right here in this direction. So lathe shaft, this front cover goes in that fashion. So this guy is going to be oriented in such a fashion. If it's not, just take your screwdriver and just twist it a little bit to get it in the right orientation. So looking at it, reference that bolt there, kind of angles towards the seal here a little bit. So about that direction. And we'll put all this together just to make sure it fits later on. But you can see that here's the oil coming through the, getting that on the screen. Okay, oops. So you can see here's where the key dot is. You can see here's where the oil comes through the oiling holes and stuff, and you can see this little cutout here which goes into the lay shaft and supplies oil there and stuff, or the oil comes out from there and supplies oil into this area here through the lay shaft. I'm not sure which direction it comes through, but that's part of your oiling hole there. There's some, I forgot to take off the plastic gauge, but so that's what we mean by this keyed on the lay shaft, and just get it oriented correctly with the front cover so that we can put the front cover on. And that's basically all there is to installing the lay shaft. Okay, the next thing that we're going to assemble is the reverse gear and shaft. Here's the locking screw and locking tab. Here's the reverse gear and shaft. You can see on the shaft itself where it comes through this housing, the screw goes in there and it's going to go through the hole in the shaft like that, and that's how it's going to lock that shaft in there. So this guy comes out of there like that. So again, we're going to put in some oil on this guy. Alright. You can see on the reverse gear shaft it's got a cutout like a flat blade for a flat blade screwdriver, and that's to help you spin it so that you can line it up to get the screw in there. So let me get the little end of the gear. Again, lots of oil. 20W50. There we go. Alright. So the gear goes in there in this fashion right here. Slide it in there. Let me get the shaft started. Try to stay out of y'all's way and put this in at the same time. It's not an easy task. Okay, there she goes. Okay. And once we get it in that far, I like to try to get the alignment of this guy as close as possible. And then we're going to push it on through. There we go. Alright. Check it with the light real quick. The alignment. That looks pretty good. Okay, cool. Alright, now we're just going to put the bolt on. This locking tab, lock washer, this bent section will go over this flat part right here on the housing. So it'll be on there in that fashion, like that. Then we're just going to bend this piece of the tab over onto the flat of the nut once we get it tightened on there. So let's just crank this down. I know I forgot to get my, okay, and that's going to go all the way home. That's beautiful. I forgot to get my socket and gear socket drive set up, 1/4-inch socket. So that's pretty much on there. So let me get my socket to tighten this nut down, and then we're going to bend the tab over. Okay, now we're going to tighten the nut down onto that shaft. Fairly tight. That's good enough. Okay, we got the flat of the nut right there. Just take the pliers, get it started to bend that washer over. There we go. Okay, now you can see we bent the tab over onto the flat of the nut. That'll lock it down on that shaft and it won't go anywhere. So that's all there is to installing the reverse. That's a beautiful thing. Okay.